Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to my Yanfei guide. In this video, we're going to be covering everything you need to know about Yanfei. She's the newest character released in patch 1.5, right? A pyro 4-star catalyst user, and I've been testing her extensively since she came out. Now I'm going to present to you guys everything you need to know about Yanfei in one video. If there's anything I would like to add, it'll be in a pinned comment down below. Huge shout out to ZJefson87, my math guy, for helping me out with this video. And lastly, I want you guys to know that I stream most nights on Twitch. Link in the description if you're interested. Subscribe if you're new, and without further ado, let's get right into it. So the way we're going to proceed in this video is I'm going to talk about my general thoughts on Yanfei and just general information we know so far. Then I'll go over her talents, and then we'll go into her build, weapons, all that stuff. Now, first of all, I want to say that there are a lot of different ways to play Yanfei, and I will go more in detail in like the party comp section when I show different, not only like playstyles, but different team comps, different builds for your Yanfei. Overall, however, she is basically a 4-star Klee. She's a pyro catalyst user that applies pyro quite fast. Yanfei doesn't seem to apply it as fast as Klee, but it's still pretty fast. So if you want to vaporize your charge attacks or melt them or whatever, you sometimes might have to do a few normal attacks in between every charge. If you're running her with Xingqiu, right, so that the hydro from the rain swords will override the pyro, making the enemy hydro afflicted so that you can vaporize on your charge attacks every single time. And also her pyro application can be somewhat inconsistent because it does depend on your crit rate because of this passive, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Apart from that though, Yanfei's a pretty solid 4-star carry. I don't think she breaks the games by any means, but as a 4-star carry, she is good, and she has the benefit of being pyro and a fan favorite, just design-wise. So overall, I do like her, and with that out of the way, let's talk about her talents. First of all, your normal attacks generate these scarlet seals, which is kind of similar to Ningguang, but not really. Basically, you generate them every normal attack, and you can have up to 3 or 4 with Constellation 6. These do a few things. Mainly, they reduce the stamina consumption of your, of Yanfei, so your charge attacks will cost less stamina. And on top of that, with one of your talents, you actually deal bonus power damage, 5% more for every Scarlet Seal you use. You can have up to 3, or 4 with C6, which is effectively 15 or 20% bonus power damage when you have them. And when you use Yanfei's charge attacks, it does consume all of those Scarlet Seals you have, and your charge attack does an AoE pyro damage. It basically drops like an anvil on enemies, and it does AoE, and it is a pretty good charge attack. And so since your charge attack is good, right, and does AoE damage, it is what you should be prioritizing, but you can't really spam charge attacks, especially because you apply pyro so fast that if you're trying to like vaporize or something, with the Xingqiu, you want to do normal attacks in between your charge attacks, usually 2 to 3. For me personally, it's usually 3 normal attacks into a charge attack when I'm running Yanfei Xingqiu so that I can vaporize every single charge attack. But anyways, we'll get more into that in the party comp section. I don't want to repeat myself. For your elemental skill, this is just an ability that does some pyro damage and generates 3 particles, which is really important because of how much energy you need for your burst. This ability has a kind of low cooldown and a mess scaling. It's not amazing, but it does do a bit of damage, and the most important part is that you do grant the maximum amount of Scarlet Seals, which just effectively makes you do more damage and, use less stamina. Your burst, done deal, is pretty good. This is a burst similar to like Razors where you don't want to swap out of Yanfei when you use it. Effectively what it does is it'll do one big pyro damage hit, and then it'll buff you with Brilliance. And what Brilliance does is buff your damage. Again, like a Razor ult, like a Shout ult, something like that, where it buffs you and you lose it if you swap. So you want to stay on field for the uptime if you can. And so Brilliance effectively buffs your damage by generating Scarlet Seals for you and increasing the damage of your charge attacks. If you guys look at the scaling, it's not bad. The initial hit is 255, and then it buffs your charge attack and grants you Scarlet Seals the whole time. Now, the main downside of this is that it has an 80 energy cost. The duration is 15 for 20-second cooldown, so it does have a long sort of uptime. However, it's very hard to get this 80 energy back like in time, especially because you're spending a lot of time on Yanfei during the burst, right? You don't want to swap out. And yes, you can still get particles from your E, your elemental skill, but it's just really hard to get this 80 energy. And so from my testing, there does end up being some downtime, which can be annoying. Keep in mind, this burst isn't as vital to her damage as like a Shao burst is to his, but it's still very good, so you do want to maximize your uptime. So do keep in mind that the energy cost is quite expensive. For your passive talents, we've been over the first one, but for your second one, it basically gives you an extra hit of pyro damage when you charge attack and it crits. Sort of like a Crescent Pike effect, but here it's another instance of pyro damage. It's AoE and it's equal to 80% of your attack, so it does do a decent amount of damage. However, this can have the problem of applying pyro too fast, right? Because it's another pyro hit. And lastly, your talent priority should be your normal attacks first, right? Because she's a DPS, and then your burst, and then your E. Now let's talk about Yanfei's artifact sets. There's a lot of confusion regarding what you need. Do you want Crimson Witch? Do you want Wanderers? Do you want Lava Walker? I see a lot of questions. And the answer is, as always, it depends, but I will give you the best set for you, depending on your playstyle and how you're running Yanfei. Overall, I want to say Crimson Witch is one of the best sets in the game if you can use it. Effectively, it gives you 15% power damage bonus and increases your vaporize and melt damage by another 15. And then on top of that, every time you use the elemental skill, it'll basically give you 7.5% bonus power damage for 10 seconds, and you can stack it up to 3 times. Now, some people think that if you don't have like Diluc E, if you can't spam your E, right, like this has a pretty long cooldown, that Crimson Witch isn't good, but that's not true because of how good the rest of the set is. Therefore, if you are melting or vaporizing consistently, I tend to recommend Crimson Witch of Flames for Yanfei. However, there are situations where Wanderer's Troop is better, and I would recommend it if you're not consistently melting or vaporizing. If you're not like running reactions, if you're not always, as I said, vaporizing your charge attacks, I would recommend running Wanderer's Troop because it does increase your charge attack damage and give you elemental mastery. Do keep in mind that Wanderer's Troop is very hard to farm, however. I don't have a good set. I have like 2 or 3 good Wanderer's pieces, so I can't run it even if I wanted to, because you're only guaranteed 5 stars of it at AR 55 plus from your world bosses. And also, if you're not proccing any reactions, like if you're not vaporizing or melting, Lava Walker can potentially be the best if in like a mono pyro comp or in basically teams where the opponents will be affected by pyro, Lava Walker can give you more damage. But personally, I don't use it, and I like to run Yanfei with reactions. Now let's talk about Yanfei's specific artifact stats. There is quite a bit of nuance to this. First of all, as you know, her burst does cost a lot of energy. It has an 80 energy cost, as we saw earlier, and that's quite a lot. That doesn't mean you should run like a main stat energy recharge, but it does mean you can look for it in your substats. I would prioritize crit, energy recharge, and elemental mastery if you're, vaporizing as your substats, and attack percent can be nice too. For your main stats, first of all, your goblet should be pyro if you have one, and your circlet should be crit. Either rate or damage, depending, just try to get a 1-to-2 ratio, as always. Now for your sands, this is where things can get a bit complicated, so let me explain it. First of all, I wouldn't recommend energy recharge sands. Yes, Yanfei does have some energy recharge problems, but you should look for that on substats, instead of a main stat. What you should be building is either attack percent or elemental mastery. It can depend, but generally speaking, attack percent seems to be the best. And there are a few reasons for that. First of all, if you're not proccing reactions on Yanfei, go attack percent. If you are vaporizing or melting, however, elemental mastery can be good, and on some vaporize/melt carries, it can be better. The thing with Yanfei, though, is that she applies pyro so fast that it's very hard to consistently vaporize everything. If I'm running Yanfei Xingqiu, because of her passive, I'm usually vaporizing like a charge attack after 2 or 3 normal attacks, which means that I would usually prefer an attack sands. However, once again, I would say this depends on your substats, not only the substats of your sands itself, but also if you have a ton of EM on your other artifacts, or, depending on your substats in general, which one could be better for you. However, generally speaking, I do recommend an attack percent sands on Yanfei, but EM can also be good if you are spamming reactions. And in every video, people always ask to see my attributes on each character, and there's no real point because my artifacts aren't perfect, so what I'm showing you shouldn't be like your goal, it's just what I have right now. But I will show you anyways. With a widsith, so that gives me crit damage, I'm at 63, 190. With 100 elemental mastery and very low ER, my goal should be getting a bit more ER, a bit more elemental mastery, and ideally more crit rate to balance the ratio. Now let's talk about Yanfei's weapons. Quick disclaimer, you don't need an amazing weapon for her to be good. There are good free-to-play options, 4 stars, 5 stars, all that. So I will be covering all of that in this section, the best weapon for you based on what you have. First of all, I want to say all 5 stars are good for Yanfei. If you have a Lost Prayer, that's what I would recommend for a sustained DPS. But Skyward Atlas is also really good, and so is the other 5-star catalyst, the Shield Book, because it basically just gives you a bunch of attack percent. But generally speaking, Atlas and Lost Prayer seem to be the 2 best 5 stars. However, there are some really good 4 stars. For example, Widsith, especially if you can refine it, is amazing on her. It gives you a very high crit damage stat, right? 12% level 1, 55% level 90. And the effect, it'll basically give you a ton of damage for one of your rotations. For 10 seconds, you're buffed with either attack percent, elemental damage percent, or elemental mastery. Now, this is only active 1/3 of the time, right? 10 seconds every 30 seconds. But when it is up, it can give you like your peak DPS and is really, really strong. Also, I want to mention that Widsith gets a lot better with refinement, and on top of that is very good for short bursts, right? The 10 seconds that you're buffed. So if you are speedrunning something, or for just, that one burst of damage, Widsith is amazing. The Battle Pass catalyst, the Solar Pearl, is also very good because of the crit rate stat and pretty good effect. It doesn't buff your charge attacks, sadly, which is why I like Widsith, but it does increase your normal attacks, your elemental skill, and your elemental burst damage. In terms of a free-to-play option, Mappa Mari is pretty good because it has a high base attack, gives you elemental mastery as well, and 8% elemental damage bonus every time you proc a reaction, and it can stack twice, so effectively 16% at refinement 1, which makes it a pretty good free-to-play option. Keep in mind I have no constellations because Primo Gems are a myth. However, her C1 and a few of her constellations can be great, so we're going to talk about them. Her best constellation, as I mentioned, is her Constellation 1. This thing greatly decreases the stamina consumption of your charge attack, because each Scarlet Seal will reduce the stamina cost of your charge attack by 10%, and you can have 3, right? 4 if you are C6, but usually 3. And so that's 30% stamina reduction to your charge attacks. On top of that, it also increases resistance against interruption, which is very good because as a C0 Yanfei user, Without a shield, it can be annoying, getting interrupted when I'm trying to charge attack. Her Constellation 2 is pretty okay. It's not bad, it's pretty good. It gives you 20% crit rate against enemies below 50% HP, so that's just a slight buff. Her Constellation 3 buffs your E, which is whatever, and her Constellation 5 buffs your Q, which is pretty good. And then you have Constellation 4, which gives you a shield. Now this shield is actually pretty huge. 45% of your max HP, and this can make your Yanfei gameplay more comfy, I guess, because you're not really at risk when you're charge attacking as much as before. Her Constellation 6 is also good. It's nothing crazy, like I don't think you need C6, but it does just give you another Scarlet Seal, which is more damage and more stamina, more stamina reduction. Overall though, she has pretty good constellations, but they're not needed. I would say if you do want to pull for constellations, I would recommend Constellation 1. The others aren't really as important. Now let's talk about Yanfei's party setups. This is one of the most important sections of the video because there are a lot of different teams you can play with her, and it does affect, how you build her and her playstyle. Now, I have been testing comps thoroughly and talking to other theory crafters and stuff about her teams. However, I do want you guys to know that she did come out a day ago. So if there is any new information, especially around teams, it will be in a pinned comment. But for now, here's everything you need to know. First of all, you can run her as a vaporized carry. She does apply pyro very fast, especially with her talent every time you crit. But running her with Xingqiu usually lets you vaporize your charge attacks if you do like 2 or 3 normal attacks beforehand. Doing 3 normals into a charge attack, I almost always vape, as you guys can see in my Abyss 12 clear. And so running Yanfei with Xingqiu is great. Obviously one of the best 4-stars in the game and usually the best support for pyro characters, and Yanfei is no different. And so one team comp I recommend is running Yanfei with Xingqiu. And then after that, I have a healer who's Bennett here because, Bennett's great. But it doesn't have to be him. You can run Jean if you want Viridescent. You can run Diona if you want a shield. And, obviously just a healer here. And then my last character is Zhongli for a shield and a resistance shred. And so this is like my vaporized team. However, there's a lot of different ways to play this. This last character is pretty fill. And I've actually tested running Fischl instead of Zhongli to be able to proc electrocharged, and while the enemy is electrocharged, you can also vaporize on Yanfei. With my testing, this seemed a bit inconsistent to constantly vaporize. However, I know some people really like this comp, and it does seem to work, so I do want to mention it, but for me, it hasn't been the most consistent. You can also run Yanfei as a melt carry. You can run her with Xingqiu and a cryo character like Kaeya or Rosaria. And then, even if you freeze enemies with Xingqiu Kaeya, that's good, and then you can melt them with Yanfei. So usually with pyro characters that want to melt, I recommend still running Xingqiu and a cryo character. But you can also do something like 2 cryo units. You can do like Rosaria Kaeya, and then sometimes it'll be like a reverse melt if basically your cryo supports are melting. But either way, this is good team damage. So this is an example comp. However, for reactions, again, I know I'm selling Xingqiu in every video, but he's so good that you can run Yanfei with him and either vaporize or melt pretty consistently as long as you do a few normals between your charge attacks. There are also mono pyro comps you can do where it's only basically just spamming a bunch of pyro abilities. Yanfei will get more particles this way, and it can be okay damage, especially because Shangling is a great unit. But this isn't my favorite comp, and it doesn't really enable your Yanfei to proc any reactions, but it is something you can run. Also, if you want your Yanfei to overload, which is something that I personally don't do because I like spamming Vaporize for bigger numbers, you can run a Yanfei with Fischl and Beidou and have a sort of a comp that's honestly carried by Beidou. Basically, your Fischl and Beidou are going to be constantly proccing. Well, you're going to constantly be proccing overload overall, but your Yanfei is going to be DPSing while Fischl and Beidou are off-field supports. Fischl acting as a battery for Beidou, and your whole team, electro particles nonstop, and you just deal a mix of pyro damage, electro damage, and overload. So I tried to show you guys a bunch of different team comps so you can pick the one that you like the most or the one that you have characters for, or basically just help you decide. Personally, I enjoy playing her either vaporize or melt. I know some people complain that she applies too much pyro, but as long as you do 3 normal attacks between your charge attacks or whatever amount is right for you, then you should be fine, and that's how I personally play her. So this is the comp I usually run, or I could replace Zhongli with Kaeya or something, who is a 4-star, so this is more accessible. And my Yanfei does do quite a bit of damage. Her team comps are very important. However, there are many different ways to play her, and that's what I tried to show you. Alright, so now we're going to do a DPS showcase, and I'm mainly going to do Abyss 12 and a few bosses. This shouldn't be too long of a section because Yanfei has consistent DPS in her burst, but it's not a huge one-shot. So it's mainly just going to be Abyss 12 and a few bosses here and there. Hope the guide was helpful, and I hope you guys enjoy the showcase.
But it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you, for you, for you, for you, for you, for you, for you. gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you, for you, for you, for you, for you, for
So yeah, overall, Yanfei is a great character, great 4-star catalyst user, good in many different team comps, and I tried to cover everything you need to know about her in one video. There's so much new that came out in patch 1.5, I can't wait to do it all. I still haven't done the quests because I've just been testing Yanfei, but there are 2 new artifact sets and a lot of things I want to cover, so stay tuned for that because a lot of new videos are coming. If you're new, be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitch, and join the Discord if you want. But that being said, I gotta go. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
短所鉄拳